Hello. Today we're going to be looking at 11.3, which is on different shapes of distributions. And that's just the title that they give it out of the book. But honestly, if I could give you a new one today, is on histograms. See, chapter 11, we didn't give you a lot of introduction, but chapter 11 has to do with different ways of looking at data. So it's kind of an introduction to like a stats class. And so in these different lessons, they're showing you ways that you maybe don't know of and how to take data and display it. So for instance, if I were to give you this problem, you see this data. Would you make a bar graph, a line graph? A pie graph, or a circle as your book calls it, really wouldn't be helpful here. So it's like, what ways can you display your data? And so that's kind of what they're talking about in this chapter. And so in today's lesson, we're going to look at histogram. Now, sorry to keep going back and forth, but we could make a box and whisker. No reason we couldn't. It's just why? Like, do we need a box and whisker? So why not try something different? So today what we're going to look at is what is a histogram, kind of similar topics as we saw with box and whisker. Let's make a histogram and let's answer some questions about it, okay? So a histogram. Roughly, these are what histograms look like. They're very, very similar to bar graphs, okay? The difference between a histogram and a bar graph is one, you'll notice how they touch. In bar graphs, there's usually spaces in between, but in histograms, they touch. Along the bottom, you have intervals. So you don't just have a single number, or you wouldn't use this if you were talking about like cities or pizza toppings. Notice it's precipitation, so it's 0 to 3 inches, 4 to 7 inches, and then its frequency is along the side. So they're very, very similar to bar graphs, but there's some differences. So up here where it says histogram, I guess I would basically tell you it's like a bar graph, only you have connected, only let's say maybe with, connected bars and intervals. That's the big thing here. So it's the big piece is they're connected in intervals. Now again, you don't have to know the specific definition. It's just if somebody gives you a set of data and says make a histogram, you need to know what that means. Frequency table. Frequency table is just something to help you get your frequency, I guess, to get your numbers. So this is just something that helps get interval numbers. And there's different ways to do this. So I know obviously I'm Mrs. Twig. I have my way. Maybe if Miss Fergursky made this video, she might show you slightly different. So if you look it up on the internet, you might see some slight variations to how people make their frequency tables. But I'll kind of just go through the basics with you. And then down here, we saw this yesterday in the box and whisker, is the different types. So you have symmetric, and we have skewed again. Now notice again with skewed is if it's longer or more stretched out, we call that skewed right. And if it's longer on the left, we call that skewed left. Where notice this is symmetric. And I wish I was there with you, but a lot of people call this kind of like a bell curve. And you probably have heard a lot about this right now with COVID-19 and how they keep telling you to flatten the curve. This is a bell curve, and it just kind of means it's really symmetric and majority of the data falls right in the middle, okay? So same thing that we've been seeing is if your histogram is symmetric, you want to choose mean. It doesn't matter which way you're skewed. You can be skewed left or you can be skewed right, but you want to choose median. And really this has to do with if you have an outlier versus no outlier. Okay, because if you don't have an outlier, notice how your most of your data is kind of bundled. Now you might have one or two, but most of your data is all right in the middle. If you do probably have outlier or multiple, so not really an outlier, but you have multiple data all on one side. So you have a lot of data over here, it's kind of pulling it that way, okay? So you're gonna see them talking about that. So if we go down below here, this one's already made for you, so it's just asking you to think about the shape. So if I look at city A, if I kind of draw this in from the corner to corner, I would probably say that this is being pulled right here. So if this was me, I would say that this would be skewed right. Just because it's kind of drawn out more this way. And so based on that, because I said it's skewed, I would choose median. Now, if you notice, I have the word variation crossed off. We're not going to worry about variation right now due to the fact that we're trying to kind of condense the material. If you were to take a stats class, they would talk about this, so we just won't worry about that for right now. If you look at city B, if I connect from corner to corner, do you notice kind of how my curve pretty much on both sides is fairly symmetrical? So in city B, I would say symmetric, and I would choose mean. And that's kind of what they're looking for here, okay? Now again, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly symmetrical. I know this one's a little shorter. I know this one's a little taller, and then there's nothing here. But based on the drawing, this is more symmetrical or this is more skewed, okay? So the other goal for today is to be able to draw one, okay? So we've got all this data for is showing the number of email attachments sent by each employer during a 2-week period. And so I need to get my intervals. Now, if you notice, they're telling me to use 6 intervals starting at 1 to 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 1 to 20, and I know I'm going to have 6 of them. And so I'm going to do what they call daisy chaining. So it ends at 20. So then I'm going to start at 21. Now, there's a span here of 19. So what I need to do is go 21 plus 19, and that gives me my interval. So notice this one goes to 40. And then I would wrap it around again. So I start at 41. And so I take 41 plus 19, and I get to 60. I mean, do you notice the pattern here? 20, 40, 60. Now, it doesn't always fall that way, but if you start to notice a pattern, you won't need to keep typing these into your calculator. So I do 61 now to 80, and then I'm going to do 81 to 100. And notice that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice they tell me to do 6 of them, so I got to do one more. 101 to 120. Now, everybody would probably start their frequency table just like this, but now how you get your numbers here, I think, is what varies from person to person. Some people like to take this category and they go through and they just count how many fall within this category and they write a number down. What I do is I just go through and make tally marks. So I say, okay, 74, that falls here. 85, so I know I've used this one, so 85 falls here. 65 falls there. 64 is also in that same one. 72, 42. So see how I'm just going through and seeing how many are going to fall into each category. So let me quick do that. It can be a little time consuming, but it's not horribly hard. So I already should have done, all right, we'll just keep going with this one. I should have done the 5 mark, but that's okay. All right, so I think I've got them all. So now you can tell I have 1 in the first category, 2 in the second, 6. Now this one I gotta count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 here as well, 2 in this, and 1 in here, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and label my categories across the bottom. Now it might be kind of hard to tell, but I do have some dashed lines here, but if you don't, you just have to kind of do the best you can. So I'm going to go 1 to 20, and like that's like my first interval. And then I'm going to go ahead and do all my intervals across the bottom here. I have to remember how many I'm doing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got them all. And I should give this a label. So this is number of email attachments. And then along the other side is going to be my frequency. Now notice my frequencies needs to go from 1 to 6. So I'm going to go ahead and do my frequency. And so then I have, and again, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a little tiny dashes here. And I probably could have spread these out a little bit more because they're so close together, but I'm using a pen, so we're going to have to go with it. All right, so between 1 and 20, there's only 1. Between the next category, there's 2. The next one is 6. Now you don't have to put the numbers on the inside like this. If you notice how on this one over here, they did not put, like this was an 8, and then this would have been what, probably a 15, and so on. They didn't put the numbers on the inside. Sometimes I like to, just because it kind of reinforces if you go straight across and it's not perfectly the same height, it just kind of helps. Plus I'm getting a little older and my eyes aren't as good anymore. So it just kind of helps me a little. But do you notice how my bars are touching each other? Okay. And then 2, and then 1. Hey, look at that. There's my histogram. So that really wasn't too hard. It almost might have been harder to try to do a bar graph or a line graph, because notice I only had to do 6 different blocks instead of trying to do these separate somehow. So I actually kind of like histograms. They're not too bad. You just have to kind of know what the vocabulary is. And then down here, it's asking you for a measure of center. And really, you're going to answer the why question before you answer this question. So I look at this and I ask myself, is this symmetric or skewed? And I would say, man, this is a perfect symmetric one. This is what we truly call a bell curve. So I would say that this is symmetric. And so I would choose mean. That the mean probably and the median are probably the same number. So the mean is your better representation, but honestly, it probably wouldn't matter which one you pick because they'd be the same. But this is how we coordinate it. So you really answer the why first, okay? So I hope that helps with histograms. And again, please reach out to your teacher if you have any questions.